In fact, this weekend, in between all the exciting Game 7s and the Usyk-Fury fight, I was sitting around lounging, and I remember hearing about this documentary on Peacock, and it's about the 1990 Yankees called The Bronx Zoo. You're like, what's so special about the 1990 Yankees? Absolutely nothing. I remember watching them as a kid. One of the most infamous stories that you remember is Andy Hawkins pitching a no-hitter and losing the game.
I do remember that.
That epitomized the whole season. Like, they stunk. And they had a bunch of, like, criminals and wackadoodles on the team. Mel Hall was on that team. He's in prison now. He's in prison in the documentary for 45 years. Luis Polonia, Deion Sanders was on that squad. It was just like a bunch of like random people. They were mix-matching characters. George Steinbrenner was just going crazy trying to build a team around veterans like Don Mattingly. Don Mattingly gets hurt. He's out for the whole season. Pascual Perez, they got him. He's hurt. He's out for the whole season. And he was a train wreck anyway.
I forget Pascual Perez. Was he supposed to be a star for you guys?
He was supposed to be. He didn't report to spring training. He had a bad drug problem. Like I said, he got hurt. He was out. Long story short, they were the worst. They started off with Bucky Dent as the manager, and they ended up with Stump Merrill as the manager.
Stump Merrill.
They were like a traveling circus of misfits. And then when Don Mattingly got hurt, they called up Kevin Moss.
By the way, where is this documentary that people can watch?
Peacock.
Okay.
If you watch The Great Dan Patrick, you probably have it. If you want to watch your football this upcoming season, you got to have it. So you don't need to appreciate the Yankees to appreciate the sentiment of the story here, okay? So Don Mattingly gets hurt. They call up this rookie, Kevin Moss. Now, you guys probably remember him if you collected baseball cards, especially. He was a future star. And I think he still holds the record till this day for the fastest to reach 21 home runs. He had over 10 in his first 100 at-bats. Dude could hit a fastball. He was hitting bombs. Kevin Moss. And that is what opened up the eyes to all the new people they were bringing in, Gene Stickmichael, Buck Showalter. When they started to rebuild, they're like, we took a chance on Kevin Moss. Let's take a chance on our homegrown talent, on these young guys that we got here. And they brought up the core four. They started revolving the team around Bernie Williams and Pettit and Rivera and Posada and Jeter. And then after having the worst season ever in 1990, in 94, they're right where they need to be. It's a strike. 95 to make the playoffs. 96 begins the dynasty. So the point of the story is sometimes you need to hit rock bottom and be the absolute worst, like they were in 1990, to force significant change, which they did in a short amount of time to, again, like I said, start the dynasty and make a real change.
I don't think sometimes. I think all the time.
So we posed a question. In life, in sports, other examples, do you have to hit rock bottom to be great? Because that's what started it all. That's the whole point. Like, to see how the Yankees got to where they were during that winning era of theirs, you have to go back to see why they had to make all these moves in the first place, because they were that bad in 1990.
I'm a firm believer in forget sometimes. I think all the time in life, you need to hit rock bottom sometimes. Otherwise, you won't make a change. And I'll throw a couple examples at you. I think the worst thing that could happen in the NFL, because we all know football's king. We all love football the most. But there's nothing worse, and Danny G will tell you, because his team's been in that position. If you're 7-9, 6-10, when there was a 16-game schedule, sorry.
I think the Dallas Cowboys are a great example because they're good, they're packing seats, so there's no real need to make those changes because they're still making money.
I don't agree with that because I think every year the Cowboys think they could contend. I'm talking about teams like the Saints, the Raiders.
Where you're drafting 11th, 12th.
Where you're, like the Cowboys never have a big draft pick, and they have free agents may want to go to Dallas. I'm talking about teams that are 7-10, 8-9, 9-8, 6-11, where you're
not drastic enough to flip it around.
You're not getting the top 3 picks.
Exactly.
And you're not making the playoffs every year. So you're stuck in this purgatory of, you don't know if you're one player away or you suck.
So you're saying it's even better to be rock bottom than middle of the pack, because middle of the pack's not going to force any significant change.
Teams like the Cowboys and the Eagles and Niners, like those teams that are consistently pretty good, they think at least every year they have a chance, and they do. It's really teams like, no offense, Danny, like the Raiders, who have had seasons where 7 and, like I said, 7 and 10, 8 and 9, 9 and 8. Where
you're right. Since 2016, when they had that great record, they've been the middle of the pack since. And you're not good enough to dominate, yet you're not bad enough to get a pick at the top 5 that'll really change your franchise.
Look at baseball. You said baseball with the Yankees in the 90s.
They finished, by the way, that season 65 and 97. And they went on a little bit of a streak because of the Kevin Moss stuff and, some of these younger players starting to pick up that slack. And that's where they got inspired. But still, 65 and 97 to, again, a dynasty just 6 years later.
Well, there's a better example, but they just don't have the dramatic stories that the Yankees have of the drugs and craziness of those 90s teams. The Astros, cheaters or not, were and are a dynasty. They're playing terrible this year, but you remember the Astros had they had seasons in a row where they had 50 or 60 wins. We're talking Garbaggio, Sucio.
Yeah,
the Astros were so bad before they consistently were winning 100 games a year. Let me look up the Astros.
I would
season
say
by
just
season.
think of all these bottom feeders, right? Rock bottom, Eminem style, like we said, and realize that you could only go up from there. So that's the positive outlook there. And sometimes you need that rock bottom to make that shake up and to get to where you need to be. And unfortunately, you see that in life too. You see that in life, that a lot of people that are doing well actually had to hit rock bottom to get them motivated and to get them back on track. Because when you're living just that everyday sort of, like you said, middle of the ground routine, no change, no significant change is forced upon you. It's like our buddy Spot. Dude, why is he the epitome of good health and flexing all the time? And why does he think he's an Adonis now? Because he was out of shape.
He was a slob.
He hit rock bottom. He got quintuple open heart surgery, bypass surgery. His life depended on it. So if he was in mediocre shape and he was just cruising around like he would have never been forced to make that change.
He said they found pizza crust from 1989.
They did. In his art, they found gabagool.
They found SpaghettiOs from 87 stuck in his arteries.
Yeah, it was true.
And that forced him to make a change. So I would say, based on the story of the 1990 Yankees, you look at any team that stinks, and you got to say, hey, I'd rather be that team than the Saints or any middle-of-the-pack team that you want to pick.
When they cut open Spot, luckily he's good now, but they were like, wait a minute, is that a Gusher fruit snack in there? And they found a lot. Now, I said the Astros, right? Listen to this.
They found a Dunkaroo from 92.
In 2011, 2012, and 2013. You hear me there? 2011 to 2013, 3 years in a row.
Yeah.
The Houston Astros were 56 and 106, 55 and 107, and 51 and 111. Fast forward a couple years, starting in 2015, 3 years later, made the playoffs every year since, including a few World Series.
Well, and sometimes you need to
rock
bottom forces you to make significant changes, right? Managerial changes, player changes. According to this documentary, and I didn't know this as a lifelong Yankee fan, there was only one Yankee on that whack-ass 1990 team that won in 96 with them, and that was Jim Leyritz.
I get it. Sometimes the fans rather see a winner than a loser, but I feel like Dan Beyer and I've had this conversation about his Seahawks where we like Geno Smith. He's a really good guy, a good quarterback, but the Seattle Seahawks with the current roster and everything, they could make the playoffs. They could not make the playoffs, but you're not good enough to win it all, but you're not bad enough to make a big change.
Yeah, absolutely. And being in the middle absolutely stinks because you don't have the reason to tear it all down, as you guys were talking about. I will say, though, that I think that the Yankees are in such a unique spot. Just using the Astros example, they didn't have the payroll of what a Yankee team would be willing to do.
But that team, the team that changed them around, were all homegrown players.
They just had the ability to keep them with money.
They had the ability to keep them.
Sure. The part of the Astros, which I thought was so challenging, was how do you tell a fan base for 3 years don't care about us? Because I think that would be impossible to do if you were like that, just wouldn't fly in New York. And I remember asking the old Astros GM Jeff Luhnow about this and saying like, because I just thought it was bad for the fans, and I said, what about if it doesn't?
Question.
What about if it doesn't work? I said, what if it doesn't work? And his response was, it's going to work. And it ended up working. I mean, so you have to have extreme confidence in what you're doing, and I guess an ownership group that is willing to back what you've done to really turn it around. It's just, gosh, to do what the Astros did.
Well, you know what happened too with the Yankees, Dan? It backs up what you're saying here. What was toxic was George Steinbrenner as ownership, and in 1990 he had to put all his power aside to Gene Michael. So Gene Michael took over, and he eventually made Buck Showalter in charge, and that changed everything. You know what Buck Showalter said? The first thing he said, he goes, the first opportunity I get, I'm getting rid of Mel Hall, because he saw him as the problem, and he was getting in the way of future stars like Bernie Williams. He was bullying Bernie Williams and wasn't letting him grow as a player. So I would say, think of all the weak-ass teams. It could be your weak-ass office, wherever you work, your weak-ass crew. Who's the – I don't like this expression, but they say who's the cancer, right?
Yeah.
Who's the problem? Who is that problem? Get rid of him. Find a way, because he's bringing down everybody.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not.
It starts with management.
I'm not advocating, just break up with your mediocre relationship. But a lot of times, someone's stuck in a. Let's be honest, like they're dating someone that's maybe not the right person for them, but they're not great. They're not super happy, but because there's not too much drama, they just stay in an unhappy marriage.
I think the worst example, obviously, if you're talking in sports, was the 76ers.
Trust the process.
Yeah, because you didn't see that through, and then you never like the fruits of what you had sacrificed for so many years. Yeah, you have Joel Embiid now, and how many different times have they tried to put something around him, and they kind of fell into Joel Embiid. So there were years of bad draft picks and bad moves of them even admitting that they were going to stink. And then there was no way that they even saw themselves out.
Yeah, and listen, not to rub the salt in the wound, Danny J. I know we got a break because we're playing Tyson Trivia, but back to your Raiders for a second. Just even moving forward with them, with Gardner Minshew, who I like, it just reeks of an 8-9 or 9-8 team that won't go anywhere, but would excite you if they got a wild card spot.
The difference this offseason is that the Raiders' defense is ranked 8th going into this new season, whereas last season they were ranked 28th. So Antonio Pierce and that staff have done a great job of turning that defense around.
The Raiders.
It's turning dilemmas into dilemonade.
Do you think
if
that's
you're
why...
rock bottom, you might actually be sitting in a better position. And I don't care if you care about the Yankees. It's a great story, and it's a great watch. Again, it's called The Bronx Zoo on Peacock if you want to check it out.
Do you think that's why the Bears did make the decision to say, let's get off Justin Fields, let's just totally go for it with Caleb Williams? And because remember for a minute it was like, oh, maybe we trade the pick and keep Fields and build around them. I think that was the scenario of like, listen, we're at rock bottom. This is the time to take that big chance. And we'll see this year. A lot of people, including people on the network, including our friends on FS1, like the Nick Wrights of the world, there's people that are saying the Bears are a playoff team. So we shall see.